wanted to remind you that we're going to have a long time for questions and answers. But before that, it is a great honor to introduce the National Secretary of whom we are very grateful to for his contribution and that of the so many others who have contributed to this conference. Dr. Gutierrez, if it had not been for Dr. Gutierrez, this conference would not have. He was born in Havana. Please move the microphone to him. And during that period, he obtained a master's in political science and in journalism, and also a degree from the International University in Florida. And recently, he obtained a degree in international studies. He has worked as a journalist and as a professor, and his publications include an essay towards the great nation, an invisible study, Cuba and terror and steps towards freedom. He is a human rights activist and has been working since 1980 and has had a very effective action, very effective manner of having civil disobedience, but a very peaceful one, as a movement leading to the creation of a true democracy in our island. He's a member of the Democratic Society of Cuba and has given many lectures on that subject, and he's also traveled throughout Europe, Latin America, and the United States in carrying this message. Most welcome to you, Dr. Orlando Gutierrez. I wish to thank you and the Committee on Free Trade Unionism for this invitation. It is an honor to share with Jack Otero and Mr. Donahue and Dr. Assel a lecture that I'm greatly admire. I want to also thank you for the presence of so many men and women and union workers of Cuba. There are many here who are really, whose presence really moves me, and especially Ernesto Diaz. He was one of the first people who was working on the independent union movement in Cuba. You have truly set forth the reality of the workers in Cuba. And I would like to summarize a little and sort of think about how we can come out of this. I would like to insist on what we know about the communist regimes. Historically, they have always worked against the working classes. Their methodology is that the Communist Party and the Labor Party knows that this is so. As we read about Lenin, who imposed himself against each of the strikes, but because of the lack of political direction that they had, he never could truly fight the Bolsheviks. We know that the other totalitarian regimes, one of the first steps that Fidel Castro took when he had his coup d'etat was against the Cuban labor movement, the CTC, and he destroyed that movement. a coup d'etat which was initiated after Batista, and which he opened again. We knew that Fidel Castro wanted to eliminate the workers as an obstacle to his overtaking power. The best way is to repress the Labor Party and destroying the significance of work, of labor, making an obstacle, setting up obstacles between work and the worker. When the worker thinks that it is better to work to improve his life, and then there's that demoralization of the population. When I say that the regime has always repressed the working class, it is necessary to see that the resistance of the workers has always been constant. The MLRF came from the labor movement, from the unions, members who felt repressed by the regime, and we must also remember that the regime has complained bitterly of the lack of cooperation and the lack of discipline among the workers. Castro has always punished the workers for not fulfilling their quotas, for not working, etc. He has forever stated his frustration with the Cuban workers and that of the agricultural laborers. Fidel Castro has insisted on talking on the lack of discipline among workers and the non-cooperation with the goals and the quotas that he established for the workers. Realistically, we can affirm that this is a great obstacle and a great frustration to this regime, and he has tried to do away with this lack of discipline. He has said, you must understand that arriving late and to steal something, and this is nothing individual. It's an attempt against our jurisdiction. Raul knows that the worker who doesn't cooperate, who doesn't go to the party meetings, is doing so because he knows, because he doesn't agree with the government. And what the government wants is for them all to be together so that they can dominate them. We also know today something very important, that communist regimes, when they fall, and no communist regime in the first generation has fallen. But there are communist regimes that have fallen, and none of them have fallen without the participation of the workers. In other words, what obliged the military in Poland to negotiate? Well, it was the workers. That is legendary. It was demonstration after demonstration, strike after strike, until the government could no longer conquer, thanks to all that. We know that Gorbachev was asking the military to help him against the workers. When he realized that he doesn't have the power, he decided to negotiate with the Solidarity movement because he couldn't control them. It wasn't the Velvet Revolution in the Czech Republic. It was because of the general strike. That strike that lasted 2 weeks, that was able to do away with the Communist Party, even though they remained in power until the strike generalized throughout the country. Also important in this nonviolent civilian struggle, there has been a very visible the general demonstrations in the squares and the plazas, and we now see the last totalitarian regime, the first generation that has received international support. We have seen the shoemakers and the people who come to assist us. But we are living in a time when the capacity of people to rise against dictatorships has been clearly demonstrated, and that's important for us. To conclude, I would like to make five comments on guidelines as to how to come out of this situation. Number one, there's no recovery of the sense of work unless the citizens can recover. You are all familiar with steps for freedom. There have been stoppages, work stoppages, etc. But the Castro regime very accurately finds immediate solutions for those problems to avoid them becoming political problems. There is a constant resistance, a social resistance, until those who resist and until we contribute to create that conscience that if there is no freedom, there is no solution, that everything else is just a patch. If there is a resistance, it must be spontaneous, it must be individual, it must be social. We must create this conscious movement. And this is important, not only because of the immediate effect in removing totalitarianism, but there can be no nation unless there is a value given to the citizenship and a value placed on labor. Those most successful revolutions have been the ones that have respected those. In 6 months, they had dismounted communism altogether in Poland. They went room by room, dismantling it. But that's why Poland grew at such an incredible rate. We went to see the Poland as it was in 1989 and now. To do away with this sickness that is totalitarianism, this is the way to do it. The more the institutions, the totalitarian institutions are standard, the more damage there will be. In Cuba, we see this constantly. We see the social deterioration of Cuba. There is a resistance. The group of 75 is the ladies in white, etc. When we see that reality, we see that women, the workers, and the students are the most important. If we create consciousness among them, that is the most necessary element in order to achieve change. But the government has formidable repression facilities. Even now, the President of the United States is a spokesman who is seeing what is happening there. But communist regimes are weak because they're denying a reality that power comes from the people. Power begins with the people. But the fact is that power rests on the people. And we must work with that people, so that we can achieve that change. And everything that José Acel and Professor Cordova have said is right. Social struggle in Cuba is not, it is a therapeutic necessity, and it is something that must be achieved in order for the Cuban people to achieve their freedom. In 2003, they attempted to put all of the union's members put in jail because they wouldn't shut up. They continued to fight. Instead, the movement grew further. And why? Because power begins with the people. And in truth, no speech can deter that. So today, more than ever, this is visible, even though the situation seems adverse. Every day, the people of Cuba are working towards their movement, and it makes us realize that all of us are dissidents with them.